The air in the small, dimly lit office felt thick and oppressive, the kind of heaviness that clung to the skin and seeped into the bones. Walter Collins sat hunched over his desk, the familiar creak of the old wood beneath him echoing faintly in the silence. It was a space that had seen better days, much like the man himself. Dust motes danced lazily in the slanting rays of sunlight that fought their way through the grimy window, illuminating the faded family photographs that lined the walls, snapshots of laughter and love, now tainted by betrayal. He often found solace in those memories, yet today they felt like shackles binding him to a past he wished to escape. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder of the impending doom that loomed just beyond his door. He could hear the muffled voices of unfamiliar men, their laughter grating against his nerves, punctuated by the occasional clatter of something heavy being dropped. They were here for his home, the last vestige of comfort and familiarity in his life. $5 million worth of property, lost in the blink of an eye, a cruel twist of fate he had never anticipated. His son, Marcus, had been the architect of this disaster, a betrayal so profound it felt like a wound that would never heal. Walter had raised him, nurtured him, sacrificed everything to ensure Marcus had a better life than his own. Yet, in a moment of desperation, fueled by an insatiable greed and a hidden debt that Walter still couldn't fathom, Marcus had sold their family legacy to the highest bidder. The thought of it ignited a slow burn of anger deep within him, a simmering rage that threatened to consume him whole. As the voices grew louder, Walter clenched his fists, his knuckles whitening against the wood grain. He had always been the quiet one, the gentle giant who preferred to observe rather than act. But beneath that exterior lay a mind sharp as a blade, a reservoir of strength that had yet to be tapped. He had watched as Marcus spiraled into darkness, entangled in a web of deceit and desperation. It was a tragedy not just of loss, but of a son he barely recognized anymore. His thoughts drifted back to the day he had discovered the truth. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that seemed to seep into one's soul. Walter had been sifting through the mail, his heart sinking as he found a letter from a law firm. The words blurred together as he read it over and over, disbelief churning in his stomach. It detailed the sale of their home, the transfer of ownership, and a massive sum of money that had changed hands like a whisper in the dark. $5 million gone, and all for what? A fleeting moment of relief for a son who had turned his back on everything they had built together. "Dad, I can explain," Marcus had said, his voice trembling, eyes darting away as if he could escape the reality of his actions. Walter had felt the weight of betrayal settle like lead in his chest, suffocating his ability to respond. Instead, he had turned away, retreating into the sanctuary of his own mind, where grief and anger twisted together like the roots of a dying tree. Now, as he sat in his office, the impending doom of eviction looming over him like a storm cloud, Walter steeled himself. He would not go quietly. He still had one piece of evidence, one final card to play that Marcus would never suspect. Hidden away in a small, unassuming box beneath the loose floorboard in his bedroom was the truth. A document that could turn the tide, a secret that had been passed down through generations, a trust fund that could buy him time and leverage in this cruel game. The thought of it brought a flicker of hope, but it was overshadowed by the crushing reality of his situation. As the door swung open and the men stepped into the office, Walter forced himself to put on a mask of defeat, a facade of the broken man they expected to see. He could feel the smirk on the face of the lead man, a tall, brutish figure with a voice that dripped with condescension, ready to deliver the final blow. "Mr. Collins, I presume?" the man said, crossing his arms over his chest, the very picture of smug authority. "We're here to discuss your predicament." Walter nodded slowly, his gaze steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of witnessing his pain. "Yes, I understand. Good. Let's skip the pleasantries, shall we? You're being evicted. We have the papers right here." The man waved a sheet of paper dismissively, as if it were a mere formality, a trifling detail in their grand scheme. Walter inhaled deeply, drawing on the well of strength that lay buried beneath his sorrow. I see. But I think you'll find that things may not be as simple as they appear. The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued, the slightest hint of amusement flickering across his features. Oh? And what do you mean by that? It's just that I have something you might not be aware of. Something that could change the entire situation. Walter's voice was calm, measured, though inside a storm of emotions raged. A tempest of grief, betrayal, and a burgeoning resolve that whispered promises of revenge. The man leaned back, a smirk returning to his face. You're bluffing. You've got nothing. But Walter's heart raced as he thought of the document hidden away, the trust that could provide a lifeline. He would play the long game, waiting for the opportune moment to reveal his hand. For now, he would let them believe he was broken, a victim in their eyes. They would never suspect the quiet man in the corner had been biding his time, crafting a plan that would not only reclaim what was lost but teach his son a lesson he would never forget. As the man continued to taunt him, Walter's resolve hardened. This would not end here. The pain of betrayal would be met with a cold, calculated response. He would turn the tables, and when the time came, Marcus would have to face the consequences of his actions, alone. The door creaked open, its hinges protesting like an old man waking from a deep slumber. Walter's heart raced, pounding against his ribcage like a caged bird desperate for escape. The men who entered were shadows of authority, their silhouettes looming large against the dim light of the office. Walter squinted, the fluorescent bulb flickering overhead casting a sickly hue on their faces. He could see the lead man clearly, the smug smile plastered across his face, the kind that reeked of a man who had never tasted defeat. "Mr. Collins?" the lead man drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "I trust you're aware of the situation?" His words hung in the air like the heavy scent of damp paper and disillusionment that filled the room. Walter nodded slowly, though a tempest brewed within him. He wanted to scream, to hurl the truth at them with the force of a hurricane. Yet he remained silent, his lips pressed into a thin line. He could feel the weight of the hidden document against the fabric of his shirt, a small but potent reminder of the power he still held. If only he could find the courage to wield it. "Let's not drag this out," the lead man continued, shoving his hands into his pockets as if the very act of standing before Walter was a burden. "You've got till the end of the week to vacate the premises. Your son has made his choices, and now you must face the consequences." Marcus's face flashed before Walter's eyes. His boy, the once bright-eyed dreamer who used to chase fireflies in the backyard, now reduced to a specter of regret. The betrayal felt like shards of glass embedded in his heart, each memory slicing deeper than the last. How could a father ever reconcile the love he held for his son with the pain of such a betrayal? "Leave my son out of this," Walter finally managed to say, his voice steady but low, as if he were trying to keep the tremors of rage at bay. "This is about me, not him." The lead man's smirk widened, and he exchanged glances with his companions, a silent communication that sent a fresh wave of indignation coursing through Walter. They were reveling in this moment, feeding on his despair like vultures circling a carcass. "Very noble of you," the lead man said, his tone mocking. "But the truth is, Mr. Collins, it's too late for noble gestures. You're a man out of time." Walter felt his resolve harden. He recalled the letter from the law firm, the cold, sterile language that had laid bare the reality of his situation. It hadn't just been a notification. It had been a death knell for everything he had worked for, everything he had built with his own two hands. He straightened in his chair, the familiar creak of the old wood beneath him igniting a flicker of defiance. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said, his voice now imbued with a steely edge. "You think you can just waltz in here and take everything I hold dear? You think a piece of paper gives you that right?" The lead man tilted his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. "And what do you propose to do about it, Walter? Wave your little piece of evidence around and hope it magically changes the circumstances. You're grasping at straws." Walter felt the heat rise in his cheeks, a mix of anger and humiliation. The men before him were predators, and he was the cornered prey. But somewhere deep inside, a fire ignited, a long-buried tenacity that had laid dormant beneath layers of grief and betrayal. "I'm not done yet," Walter said, the words spilling from his lips with an unexpected force. He could almost hear the echoes of his own father's voice, a man who had faced his own demons and emerged scarred but unbroken. "There's a trust fund, and I have the documentation to prove it. You think you can intimidate me into submission? You're mistaken." The lead man's expression shifted, the mocking smile faltering ever so slightly. "A trust fund?" he repeated, skepticism lacing his tone. "You're bluffing." "No," Walter said, the weight of the truth lifting him. "I'm not. I have the papers somewhere in this office. It's not over until I say it's over." The lead man exchanged glances with his companions again, and Walter could see the gears of calculation turning behind their eyes. Doubt had crept in, and with it, the faintest flicker of hope ignited within him. "Very well," the lead man said, a touch of irritation seeping into his voice. "We'll give you until the end of the week. But mark my words, if you can't produce that document, you'll be out on the street faster than you can blink." With that, they turned to leave, the lead man's smug demeanor returning as he shot Walter one last patronizing glance. "Good luck, Mr. Collins. You'll need it." As the door swung shut, the silence in the office felt deafening. Walter sat back, breathing heavily, his mind racing with possibilities. He had a week, just a week, to find that document to turn the tide in his favor. But where to start? The office was a maze of clutter, years of accumulated papers and remnants of a life once lived. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech, and began sifting through the piles. Dust motes danced lazily in the filtered light, swirling around him like specters of the past. Each piece of paper he turned over felt like a betrayal in its own right, reminders of missed opportunities and broken dreams. The faded family photographs on the wall seemed to watch him, their smiling faces mocking him with memories that felt worlds away. "Come on, Walter," he muttered to himself, frustration clawing at his insides. "Think." He paused, his gaze landing on a battered cardboard box shoved into the corner, a relic from better days. He knelt and pulled it out, the familiar creak of the cardboard echoing the sound of his heart racing. Inside were old tax returns, receipts, and documents from long-forgotten ventures. But somewhere in there, he hoped, was the one piece he needed, the trust fund papers that could save him from the impending storm. As he dug deeper, his fingers brushed against something smooth and cool. He pulled it out, revealing a neatly folded envelope, yellowed with age and dust. His heart raced as he opened it, breath hitching in his throat. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, the words nearly faded but still legible. It detailed the terms of the trust fund, a lifeline that had been established for Marcus when he was just a child. Walter's hands trembled as he read through the details. The trust was substantial, enough to cover the value of the house and then some. A wave of relief washed over him, but it was short-lived, quickly replaced by a gnawing anxiety. He had what he needed, but the urgency of the situation pressed down on him like a weight. He would need to confront Marcus again, to make him understand the gravity of what he had done. As he sat back, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand, Walter's thoughts drifted to his son. Marcus had acted out of desperation, yes, but the betrayal ran deep. Could he ever forgive him? Would they be able to rebuild the bridge that had been so carelessly burned? A flicker of hope ignited within him, battling with the shadows of despair that had threatened to consume him. Perhaps this was not just about reclaiming what he had lost, Perhaps it was about saving Marcus from himself, from the choices that had led him down this dark path. Walter took a deep breath, the familiar scent of old paper and dust filling his lungs, grounding him. He had a plan now, a flicker of purpose in the overwhelming darkness. He would confront Marcus, show him the document, and together, they would face the consequences of their actions. But first, he needed to prepare. The clock was ticking, and Walter Collins was ready to fight for his family, for his home, and for the chance to reclaim the love that had been lost. As he gathered the papers, a renewed determination settled over him like a warm blanket. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Walter felt like he might just stand a chance. The oppressive silence of the dimly lit office wrapped around Walter Collins like a heavy blanket, stifling and familiar. Dust motes danced lazily in the slanted rays of late afternoon light that filtered through the grimy window, casting a soft glow over the scattered remnants of a life once filled with laughter and warmth. Each faded family photograph on the walls seemed to whisper secrets of better days, memories of a time when hope had flourished like wildflowers in spring. But now, the air was thick with despair, punctuated only by the echo of his own heart, a relentless drumbeat of loss. Walter's hands trembled as he held the trust fund paperwork, the only tangible evidence that could turn the tide of his fate. It felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, yet he couldn't shake off the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered in his mouth. How could Marcus do this to him? The boy he had raised, nurtured, and sacrificed everything for. How could he sell the very roof over their heads without a word of warning? The thought twisted like a jagged knife in his gut. He glanced at the door, ears straining for the sound of footsteps that marked the exit of the eviction men. Their mocking laughter still echoed in his mind, the smug confidence with which they had delivered their grim news. It was a reminder of how precarious his situation had become, of how quickly everything he held dear was slipping through his fingers. Yet, as he stood there, clutching the fragile document, a flicker of determination ignited within him. This wasn't just about a house. It was about family, the bond that had been tested and threatened by greed and desperation. Walter took a deep breath, inhaling the musty air of the office, the scent mingling with the faint trace of his son's cologne that still lingered on Marcus's old jacket draped over the back of a chair. It felt like a ghost haunting the space, a reminder of what once was and what could still be. He needed to find Marcus, to confront him, not just as a father seeking answers, but as a man desperate to save the son he still believed in. With newfound resolve, Walter stepped away from the cluttered desk, the creak of the old wood beneath his feet sounding like a warning, a reminder that time was slipping away. He glanced at the photographs once more, lingering on the one of Marcus at his high school graduation, beaming with pride, a young man full of promise. "What happened to you, son?" Walter murmured to himself, the question hanging heavy in the air. He pushed the door open, the familiar sound of the office creaking in protest echoing in the empty hallway. The world outside was a stark contrast, filled with the cacophony of the city, horns honking, voices shouting, and the distant laughter of children playing. But for Walter, the sounds felt muffled, as if he were encased in glass, separated from the life he once knew. As he stepped into the street, the cool breeze washed over him, stirring the remnants of his resolve. The city loomed large, an unwieldy beast that thrived on chaos, but Walter felt a singular purpose guiding him. He needed to find Marcus, to extract the truth from him, to understand the depths of his son's actions. Perhaps there was still time to pull him back from the brink, to remind him of the values that had shaped their lives. The path to Marcus's apartment wound through the heart of the city, a serpentine journey through crowded streets and bustling shops. Walter's mind raced as he navigated the throngs of people, each face a reflection of his own turmoil. He felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that had moved on without him, weighed down by the burden of betrayal and the flickering hope of redemption. As he approached Marcus's building, A sense of urgency quickened his steps. Would his son even be home? Would he be willing to listen? The thought of confronting him sent a shiver of apprehension through Walter's spine. He had always viewed confrontation as a last resort, but desperation had a way of reshaping one's principles. The lobby of the building was dimly lit, walls plastered with peeling paint, a testament to better days long gone. Walter stepped inside, the familiar scent of stale cigarettes and old carpet filling his nostrils. He approached the elevator, anticipation and dread swirling within him. The descent felt agonizingly slow, each passing floor heightening his anxiety. When the doors finally opened, he stepped into the narrow hallway, the flickering fluorescent lights casting a sickly glow. Walter paused outside Marcus's door, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a trapped bird. The shadows stretched long before him, stretching the distance between father and son into an unbridgeable chasm. He raised his hand, hesitating for a moment before rapping gently on the door. The sound echoed in the stillness, a call into the void. He could hear movement inside, shuffling footsteps, muffled voices. Walter's breath caught in his throat as the door creaked open, revealing his son. Marcus stood there, disheveled and weary, his eyes darkened by sleepless nights. The sight of him struck Walter like a physical blow. The boy he loved transformed into a stranger. "Dad!" Marcus's voice was a mixture of surprise and something else. Fear, perhaps. "Can we talk?" Walter managed, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. Marcus hesitated, glancing back over his shoulder as if weighing the consequences. "I don't know, Dad. I'm busy." The words sliced through Walter, igniting a fire within him. "Busy with what, Marcus?" "Busy with the mess you've made of our lives." The tension hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, Walter feared he had gone too far. But then Marcus's shoulders slumped, the defiance melting away. "Fine," he muttered, stepping aside to let Walter in. The apartment was small, cluttered with the remnants of a life spiraling out of control. Takeout containers piled high, clothes strewn across the floor, and the unmistakable scent of desperation clinging to the walls. Walter felt a wave of nausea wash over him, the reality of his son's choices crashing down like a tidal wave. "Sit," Marcus said, motioning to a worn-out chair that seemed to sag under the weight of its history. Walter sat, the fabric scratchy against his skin, a stark reminder of the uncomfortable truth he was about to face. "Look, I know things have been tough," Marcus started, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed the money, Dad. I had no choice." Walter's heart sank further. "You had no choice? Selling the house was your solution? Do you even understand what you've done?" Marcus's eyes flashed with anger, a spark of the old boy Walter remembered. "You don't get it. I'm drowning here. I thought I could fix it, but I just made it worse." The admission hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting them. Walter's heart softened momentarily, recognizing the desperation in his son's eyes. "Then let's fix it together, Marcus. I found something that could change everything." "What are you talking about?" Marcus asked, a flicker of hope surfacing in his gaze. Walter pulled the trust fund paperwork from his pocket, the crinkled edges a testament to the weight they both carried. This is our way out. We can reclaim what was lost, but you have to be honest with me. No more secrets." As Marcus took the document, his hands trembled, uncertainty etched across his face. I didn't know about this. Why didn't you tell me?" Walter leaned forward, urgency in his voice. "Because I wanted to protect you. I thought you were making decisions for the right reasons. But now I see the truth. We need to work together, Marcus. I can't do this alone." The flicker of hope in Marcus's eyes began to grow, illuminating the shadows that had lingered for too long. "I want to fix this, Dad. I really do. But I need your help." Walter nodded, feeling the weight of betrayal begin to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of unity. Perhaps they could mend the broken pieces of their lives, rebuild what had been lost in the chaos of mistakes and misunderstandings. But even as they spoke, a nagging feeling settled in the pit of Walter's stomach, a whisper of warning that echoed the eviction men's mocking laughter. The world outside still loomed large, and the forces that had conspired against him were far from defeated. "Let's start with the trust fund," Walter said, his voice steady. "We need to figure out how to access it. We can't let this opportunity slip away." As they began to strategize, Walter felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a fragile flame that had battled against the darkness for far too long. Together, they would confront the storm that lay ahead, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would emerge from it stronger than before. But as Walter looked into his son's eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battles were still to come. The path to redemption was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long while he felt ready to fight. The air in Walter's office hung heavy with a mixture of lingering despair and a newfound determination, an almost palpable tension that crackled like electricity. He stood by the grimy window, staring out at the street below, where the unfamiliar men still lingered, their shadows stretching across the pavement like dark tendrils of fate. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and deep indigo, a stark contrast to the dimness of his surroundings. Walter's heart thudded in his chest, a metronome counting down the seconds until the eviction men would return. He could almost hear their mocking laughter echoing in his ears, a cruel reminder of the precariousness of his situation. But today he had something they didn't, a flicker of hope ignited by the conversation with Marcus. "Just a piece of paper," he muttered to himself, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "A trust fund document that could change everything." He turned away from the window, the faded family photographs on the walls seeming to watch him with hollow eyes. Memories of laughter, of birthday celebrations and family vacations, swirled in his mind like leaves caught in a tempest. He could see Marcus as a child, his face smeared with cake, his laughter filling the room with warmth. Now that same boy, now a man, had pulled the rug out from under him, leaving Walter teetering on the edge of an abyss. "Where are you, Marcus?" Walter whispered, his voice barely breaking the silence. He felt the weight of betrayal crushing him, yet the thought of his son stirred something fierce within him, a desperate need to understand, to reconcile. Could they truly work together to reclaim their family's legacy? Or was it an illusion, a cruel trick of the mind? He shook his head, trying to dispel the swirling doubts. He had a plan now, however tenuous it might be. He had to return to the house, to the very floorboards that had borne witness to the life they had built together. The trust fund document lay hidden beneath the wooden slats, a secret he had kept for years, a lifeline in a sea of chaos. With a resolve that felt almost foreign, Walter gathered his things. A worn leather briefcase, a tattered notepad filled with hastily scribbled thoughts, and an old flashlight that flickered with each squeeze of the handle. He glanced around the office one last time, taking in the clutter of unopened bills and dusty books. Each item felt like a reminder of the life he was clinging to, a life that was slipping through his fingers like sand. The journey to his home felt eternal, the streets outside shrouded in a cloak of night. As he drove, the headlights of his car illuminated the cracked pavement, the familiar route morphing into a path of anxiety. What if Marcus was gone? What if he'd left without a trace, disappearing into the very darkness that threatened to swallow Walter whole? His thoughts spiraled as he parked in the driveway, the house looming before him like a ghost from a forgotten past. It stood defiantly against the encroaching night, its silhouette stark against the fading light, but Walter could see the cracks that had begun to form in its structure, just like him. He stepped out of the car, the chill of the evening air biting at his skin. The familiar creak of the old wood beneath his feet felt like a welcome embrace, grounding him as he crossed the threshold into his home. The scent of aged wallpaper and the faint odor of dust enveloped him, each inhalation steeped in nostalgia. Walter moved cautiously through the dimly lit rooms, memories flooding back at each step. He paused in the living room, where the fireplace lay dormant, its ashes a testament to warmth long extinguished. He could almost hear the crackle of firewood and the laughter of his family echoing in the corners. "Focus," he reminded himself, shaking off the reverie. He made his way toward the hallway, where the floorboards creaked beneath the weight of his resolve. Each sound seemed amplified in the silence, a reminder of the life that had once thrived here, now overshadowed by betrayal and loss. He arrived at the small study, the room where he had spent countless hours working, planning, dreaming. The desk was chaotic, cluttered with papers, but he knew where to look. Kneeling down, he began to pry the floorboard loose, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. Would the document still be there? Would it hold the power he so desperately needed? As the board lifted with a reluctant groan, a cloud of dust erupted, swirling in the dim light like lost memories. Walter coughed, squinting as he reached into the darkness beneath the floor. His fingers brushed against cool paper, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He pulled it out, his heart pounding as he held the document aloft, its edges frayed but its contents intact. "Got you?" he breathed, a wave of relief washing over him. But as he examined the document, the weight of it pressed down harder than ever. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope, and yet it was also a reminder of everything he stood to lose. Not just his home, but the relationship with Marcus. With the document tucked safely in his briefcase, Walter headed for the front door, a newfound purpose igniting his steps. He had to find Marcus. They needed to confront the truth, not just about the trust fund but the tangled web of deception that had ensnared their lives. As he stepped back outside, a gust of wind swept through the yard, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down his spine. The shadows of the unfamiliar men still lingered, but Walter felt a shift within himself, a flicker of the man he once was, a man willing to fight for his family, for the legacy he had built with his own hands. He hurried back to the car, a sense of urgency propelling him forward. As he drove through the darkened streets, thoughts of Marcus swirled in his mind. He had to reach him before the eviction men returned, before the last vestiges of their home slipped away into the night. Minutes passed like hours, the weight of the document pressing against him as he parked outside Marcus's apartment. Heart pounding, he rushed to the entrance, every step echoing the gravity of the moment. He raised his hand to knock, hesitating for just a second, summoning the courage to face his son once more. "Marcus," Walter called out, his voice steady yet filled with an urgency that betrayed his inner turmoil. The door swung open, revealing Marcus's face, haggard and drawn, eyes wide with surprise. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I found it," Walter said, holding up the briefcase as if it contained the very essence of their future. "The trust fund document. We can still fix this." Hope flickered in Marcus's eyes, but it was quickly tempered by the shadows of doubt. "But what if it's too late? The men, they said—" "Don't," Walter interjected, the fire of determination burning bright in his chest. "We have a chance, Marcus. We can't let them take this from us. We need to work together. I need you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, an invisible barrier wrought from pain and mistrust. But then, slowly, Marcus stepped aside, allowing Walter to enter, the weight of their shared past hanging heavily in the air. As Walter crossed the threshold, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice, teetering between despair and the hope of redemption. Together, they could reclaim what was lost, but only if they were willing to confront not just the eviction men, but the demons of their own making. The darkness outside pressed closer, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Walter sensed a glimmer of light breaking through the shadows, a light that could guide them back home. Walter stood before Marcus's apartment door, his heart thudding like a drum echoing in a cavernous space. The fading light of dusk softened the edges of the world outside, but inside, the air felt thick and oppressive. He clutched the crumpled trust fund document in his hand, the ink slightly smudged from the sweat of his palm. This piece of paper, a lifeline in a storm-tossed sea, could turn the tide for them, but it could just as easily be the final nail in the coffin of their already fractured relationship. "Why am I here?" he murmured to himself, a quiet confession swallowed by the stillness. Walter cast a glance down the hall, where shadows curled around the corners, whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. The familiar creak of the old wood under his feet felt like a reminder of every moment he had spent in this building, a place that once held the sense of family dinners and laughter, the warmth of home, now tainted by betrayal. With a shaky breath, he raised a hand and knocked, the sound reverberating like a gunshot in the silence. He could almost hear the echoes of his past. Marcus's laughter as a child, the gleeful chaos of birthday parties, the hushed conversations during late-night talks. But now, those memories felt like ghosts hovering just out of reach, their warmth replaced by the cold chill of his son's choices. The door swung open, revealing Marcus, his expression a mixture of surprise and guardedness, like a deer caught in headlights. His once bright eyes were clouded with shadows, and stubble lined his jaw, a testament to sleepless nights and worry. "Dad?" he said, the word hanging in the air, heavy and fraught with unspoken feelings. "Can we talk?" Walter's voice cracked, the desperation behind it a palpable force. He stepped inside, crossing the threshold into a space that felt foreign yet achingly familiar. The room was dimly lit, cluttered with remnants of a life spiraling out of control. Empty bottles, takeout containers, and the hum of a television playing to an audience of one. "About what?" Marcus asked, his arms folded defensively across his chest. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a restless energy radiating from him. Walter could see the tension coiled in his son's posture, the way he avoided eye contact as if afraid of the truth lurking in his father's gaze. "About the trust fund," Walter replied, the words tumbling out, urgent and unrefined. "I found the document, Marcus. We can still save the house. It's not too late." Marcus's eyes flickered with something, hope, perhaps, or skepticism. "You think that's enough? You think a piece of paper can erase what I've done?" His voice rose, the veneer of calm shattering like glass. "I sold it, Dad. I sold our legacy for a quick payout. What good is a trust fund when the house is gone?" Walter felt the weight of those words settle over him like a shroud. "We can fight back," he insisted, stepping closer, the distance between them feeling like an abyss. "We can reclaim what's ours. But I need you to trust me, Marcus." "Trust?" Marcus laughed bitterly, a harsh sound that filled the room with an uncomfortable tension. "What is trust when you've already betrayed everything we built? You always believed in me, and look where that got you." Walter's heart sank as the truth of his son's words pierced through him. "I believed in you, yes," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But I also believed in our family. I thought we could face anything together. This isn't just about the house, Marcus. It's about us. It's about being a family again." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Marcus's face softened, the hard lines of resentment wavering as he looked away, his gaze drifting to a framed photograph on the mantel. It captured a moment of pure joy. Walter, smiling broadly, with a young Marcus perched on his shoulders, both of them unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. "Things are different now," Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I needed the money. I'm in deep, Dad. There are people I owe. They don't care about family or trust. They care about getting paid." Walter felt a chill creep down his spine. "What do you mean? Who do you owe?" "Just some bad decisions, okay? I thought I could fix it, but it spiraled out of control. The tremor in Marcus's voice betrayed the bravado he attempted to uphold. I didn't want to drag you into it, but now. He swallowed hard, the defeat evident in his posture. Walter stepped forward, a newfound determination igniting within him. Then let me help you. This is our chance to set things right. We have to go to those men, the eviction team, and show them that we won't back down. Together, we can confront them. Marcus's gaze flickered with uncertainty, the shadows of doubt still lurking in his eyes. And what if they don't care about a trust fund? What if they come for you next? Then we fight back, Walter said, his voice steady, a steel resolve forming in his chest. I won't let them take our home without a fight. I've lost too much already. The flicker of hope ignited in Marcus's eyes, and Walter saw a glimmer of the sun he once knew. You really think we can do this? He asked, his voice softer now, almost pleading for affirmation. Walter nodded, embracing the surge of love that still resided beneath the layers of betrayal. I believe in us, Marcus. We can't give up now. Marcus took a deep breath, the tension in his shoulders easing ever so slightly. Okay, he finally said, determination lacing his tone. Let's do this. As they moved toward the door, Walter felt the heaviness begin to lift, if only a fraction. The shadows of past mistakes lingered, but they were stepping into the light, together. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with impending rain, the scent of damp earth hanging heavily, as if nature itself awaited their next move. Walter glanced at Marcus, who walked beside him with a newfound resolve, the bond of father and son slowly beginning to mend. As they approached the main office, Walter's heart drummed a frantic beat of anticipation, each pulse echoing the urgency of their situation. He could see the unfamiliar men standing outside, their smug laughter ringing in his ears like an ominous bell. Remember, Walter said, his voice low but firm, we stand together. No matter what they say, we won't let them intimidate us. Marcus nodded, the flicker of hope now a steady flame in his chest. I'm ready, Dad. Walter took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. The familiar creak of the office door filled the air as they stepped inside, the dim light casting long shadows across their path. The eviction men turned, their condescending smiles morphing into expressions of surprise as they took in the sight of the Collins men standing united. What's this? The lead man sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. Back for more, are we? Walter's heart raced, but he stood tall, the trust fund document clutched tightly in his fist. We're here to talk about the house, he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. And what's rightfully ours. The lead man laughed, a cruel sound that echoed off the grimy walls. You think a piece of paper will change anything? You're wasting your time. Walter squared his shoulders, summoning the strength that had long felt buried beneath layers of despair. No, it's not just a piece of paper. It's a chance for us to reclaim what you tried to take from us. And we intend to fight for it. As the tension in the room escalated, Walter felt the pulse of determination surge through him, the flicker of hope igniting into a roaring blaze. Together, they would face this darkness, and together, they would find a way to make things right. The air in the small office felt charged, electric with tension. Walter stood, fists clenched at his sides, as the eviction men exchanged glances, their smirks fading into wary expressions. He could feel Marcus's presence beside him, a tangible warmth that brought both comfort and a torrent of conflicting emotions. The trust fund document, though still tucked away in his pocket, was like a live wire, crackling with potential, ready to spark a confrontation that could either save them or shatter what little remained of their relationship. Let's cut to the chase, Walter said, his voice steadier than he felt. You're here to take our home, but I have something to say about that. The words tasted foreign on his tongue, a mix of defiance and desperation. What's this? A last-ditch effort at theatrics. The lead man sneered, his voice smooth like oil. Let's be real, Collins. You're out of your depth. He took a step forward, his shadow stretching across the faded family photographs that lined the office walls, where moments of joy and laughter now felt like echoes from a distant past. For a brief moment, Walter's resolve wavered. The memories of Marcus as a child flooded his mind, birthday parties in the backyard, laughter spilling into the night air, and the warmth of their home before it had become a battleground. He glanced sideways at Marcus, whose face was a mixture of anxiety and determination, and he realized he wasn't just fighting for a roof over their heads. He was fighting for the remnants of their family. "Walter," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "are you sure about this?" Walter turned to his son, searching for the boy he once knew. "We don't have a choice, Marcus. If we don't stand up to them now, we'll lose everything we've built." The lead man scoffed, crossing his arms as he leaned back against the desk, an unsettling air of confidence surrounding him. "You think a piece of paper is going to save you from this?" He gestured broadly, as if encompassing the entire world outside that grimy window. "You're mistaken. You're outnumbered, outwitted, and out of time." Time. The word echoed in Walter's mind, tinged with an urgency that felt suffocating. He had spent too long allowing others to dictate his fate, and now, with the trust fund document burning a hole in his pocket, he felt its weight as a reminder of his power. "It's not just a piece of paper," Walter snapped, his voice gaining strength. "It's proof of my rights, proof that this home was built on something more than your greed." The lead man raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing in his eyes. "And you think we're just going to let you waltz away with our money? You're dreaming." "Enough," Marcus interjected, his voice rising with a newfound fire. "You may think you have the upper hand, but this is our home, not a game to be played." He stepped forward, the gap between them diminished by his resolve. Walter felt a swell of pride, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Perhaps this was the moment, the turning point where they could reclaim not only their home but their bond as father and son. "Marcus is right," he said, firming his stance. "We're not going to let you take this from us without a fight." The lead man's expression shifted, the mocking glint in his eyes replaced by something colder. "You've got guts, I'll give you that, but guts don't pay the bills, Collins. And they certainly don't keep you warm at night." He glanced at his accomplices, their faces etched with impatience. "You have until the end of the day to vacate. After that, we'll take whatever steps necessary." Walter felt a chill run down his spine. "And if I show you the document? If I prove that we have rights to this property?" A brief silence hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. The lead man weighed Walter's words, and for a moment, doubt flickered across his face. "You think we're afraid of a little paperwork? You're more naive than I thought." Marcus's eyes darted between Walter and the lead man, a mixture of fear and determination brewing within him. "Then let us see what you're really afraid of," he said, his voice steady. "We're not backing down. Not now, not ever." The lead man straightened, his smug facade cracking just slightly. "You're making a mistake, Collins. You don't know who you're dealing with. And you don't know what we're capable of," Walter replied, his voice low and resolute. "I may not have a lot left, but I have this." He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the trust fund document, the paper cool against his skin, a reminder of his purpose, his reason to fight. As he pulled it out, the office felt smaller, the air thick with anticipation. With a flick of his wrist, he laid the document on the desk, the edges curling slightly as it landed. The lead man's eyes flickered over the paper, a brief moment of confusion flashing across his face before it hardened into something unreadable. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice lacking its previous bravado. "You think this changes anything?" Walter leaned closer, his heart pounding like a war drum. "This changes everything." He watched as the lead man's gaze narrowed, the realization dawning on him like a storm cloud overshadowing the sun. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," the lead man said slowly, his voice losing its edge. "That document doesn't mean you can just waltz back into the good graces of the law." "Maybe not," Walter replied, "but it shows that I have a claim to this property. It shows that you've underestimated me." The words rolled off his tongue like a sweet melody, filling him with a sense of power he hadn't felt in years. Marcus's grip on his father's arm tightened, a silent show of solidarity. Walter could feel the warmth of his son beside him, a reminder that they were in this together, that they had each other's backs. The lead man's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping into his demeanor. "This isn't over," he warned, his bravado slipping like sand through an hourglass. "You'll regret this, Collins." Walter stood taller, the document feeling like a shield against the storm brewing outside. "We'll see about that." He turned to Marcus, their eyes locking in a moment of shared understanding. They were brothers in arms, ready to face whatever came next. As the eviction men retreated, the door creaking shut behind them, the office fell into a heavy silence. Walter felt the weight of the world lift ever so slightly from his shoulders. The flicker of hope had become a flame, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. "Dad," Marcus said, voice trembling with a mix of relief and anxiety. "What now?" Walter took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. "Now we get to work. We need to figure out how to make this trust fund thing work in our favor." There was a determination in his voice that he hadn't felt in a long time. "We need to fight for what's ours." As they moved toward the desk, the familiarity of their surroundings began to shift. The faded photographs, once a painful reminder of what they'd lost, now felt like a testament to their resilience. Each image told a story of laughter, love, and warmth, the foundation of their bond. "Together," Walter said, his voice firm and filled with purpose, "we'll find a way to make this right." As they began to sift through the paperwork, the dust motes danced lazily in the dim light, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, there was still beauty to be found. Walter felt the stirrings of hope, a flicker that promised that perhaps, just perhaps, they would reclaim not only their home but the love that had once defined their lives. With each passing moment, he knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready to face them. Together, they would rise from the ashes of betrayal, determined to forge a new path forward, a path where they would reclaim their legacy, their love, and their home. The dust in the dimly lit office seemed to swirl in a slow dance, each mote's movement echoing the turmoil within Walter Collins. He stood by the grimy window, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy winter coat. It was a coat he had worn far too long, one he was ready to shed. The trust fund document lay on the battered desk before him, a fragile lifeline amidst the chaos that had enveloped their lives. "Dad, can we really do this?" Marcus's voice broke the silence, a mixture of uncertainty and desperation lacing his words. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed tightly over his chest, as if trying to hold himself together. The shadows danced across his face, highlighting the worry etched in his features. Walter turned, his heart aching at the sight of his son. Once, Marcus had been the light in his life, a bright-eyed boy with dreams bigger than the skies. Now, he was a man haunted by his decisions, a reflection of Walter's own failures as a father. "We have to try, Marcus. This is all we have left," he replied, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of pain. Marcus sighed, the sound heavy like a lead weight dropped into water. "But what if it's too late? What if the eviction men come back? They're not just going to forget about us." His brow furrowed, and Walter could see the storm of regret brewing behind his son's eyes. "They won't take this from us without a fight," Walter asserted, his determination igniting a flicker of hope within him. "I've got proof now." We can access the trust fund, and with that, we can start to reclaim what was lost. As he spoke, he felt the warmth of resolve filling the hollow spaces of his heart, pushing away the shadows of despair. But how? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he was afraid that hope might shatter like glass. We don't even know if the money is still there. And how do we get it? I messed up, Dad. Walter took a step closer, his gaze steady on Marcus. We find out. Together. You may have made mistakes, but that doesn't define who you are. We'll figure this out just like we always have. You and me against the world. The words hung in the air, resonating with the weight of memory. They had weathered storms before, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could weather this one too. The flickering fluorescent light above cast an eerie glow, illuminating the faded family photographs tacked haphazardly to the walls. Each image told a story of laughter, of summer days spent at the lake, of Marcus's first soccer game, a time when life felt unburdened by the weight of financial ruin. Walter's heart ached for those days, but he knew they could carve a new path forward, one that could lead them back to safety. All right, Marcus finally said, a small spark of determination igniting in his eyes. Let's get that money. We can start by contacting the bank, right? They'd have records of the account. Walter nodded, feeling the resolve solidify between them, a fragile thread of hope weaving their fates together once more. Yes, and we'll need to find out the conditions of the trust. It could be complicated, but we'll face it together. As they began to strategize, the office felt less like a prison and more like a command center. Walter retrieved the trust fund document from the desk, examining it closely, his heart pounding with every detail he read. It was a lifeline, but it was also a reminder of the betrayal that had led them here. We need to be careful, Marcus. This document could turn the tide for us, but it could also put us in danger if the wrong people find out. Yeah, like the eviction men, Marcus said bitterly, running a hand through his hair. They think they can just come in here and take everything from us. Walter's jaw tightened. They don't know who they're dealing with. The anger bubbled just beneath the surface, a fierce fire igniting within him that threatened to consume all doubt. We'll show them. They think they can intimidate us, but I'm not going to let them take away our home without a fight. The tension in the air thickened as the two of them plotted their next moves. Walter felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins, each plan they crafted solidifying their bond and their resolve. He could almost see it. Their family home restored, the walls echoing with laughter once more. But that vision was tempered by the shadows lurking just outside their door. Hours passed in a blur of strategizing and planning. Walter's mind raced, fueled by a mix of hope and anxiety. Every creak of the old wood felt amplified, every distant sound a reminder of the eviction men who prowled just beyond their reach. He glanced at Marcus, who was scribbling notes furiously, the lines of worry still etched deep on his brow. Marcus, Walter said, interrupting the silence. What happened? I still don't understand how you got into this mess. I thought we were a team. The question lingered between them, heavy with unspoken fears and regrets. Marcus hesitated, the weight of his confession hanging in the air like a dark cloud. I wanted to help. I thought selling the house would fix everything, but it only made things worse. I didn't think about the trust fund. I just saw the money and I thought I could pay off my debts. His voice broke, and Walter could see the shame flooding his son's features. Marcus, Walter spoke softly, stepping closer. You're not alone in this. I'm here. We'll face the consequences together. The flicker of hope they had ignited began to dim under the weight of Marcus's guilt. But I sold our home, Dad. I did this to us. Walter reached out, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder, grounding him with the connection they had shared since his son was a small child. We can't change the past, but we can change our future. Let's focus on that. We'll rebuild. Together. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the office, a reminder of the encroaching threat that loomed over them. Walter's heart raced, and he exchanged a glance with Marcus, both of them knowing that time was running out. "We need to act fast," Walter said, urgency creeping into his voice. "Let's get to the bank first thing in the morning. We'll need to gather whatever paperwork we can find about the trust fund tonight." Marcus nodded, determination flickering back into his eyes. "Okay, we'll do this. We'll fight for our home." As they began to gather the scattered papers on the desk, Walter stole a glance outside the grimy window. The unfamiliar men loitered in the alley, their silhouettes sharp against the backdrop of the fading twilight. The world outside felt ominous, a stark contrast to the flickering candle of hope that was reigniting between him and Marcus. "Just remember," Walter whispered, "no matter what happens, we're in this together." In that moment, the bond between father and son felt unbreakable, a fortress against the storm that threatened to tear them apart. With every paper they stacked, every silent vow they made, they began to weave a tapestry of resilience, a bulwark against the forces conspiring to shatter their lives. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but for tonight, they found solace in their shared purpose, their hearts beating in rhythm as they prepared to reclaim their future. The confrontation. Walter stood in the dim, cluttered office, the trust fund document crumpled in his hand, a fragile lifeline against the mounting tide of despair. Outside, the unfamiliar men loomed like storm clouds gathering on the horizon, their laughter mingling with the distant hum of the city, a reminder of the world that continued to spin while he stood at the precipice of ruin. He could feel the familiar creak of the old wood beneath his feet, a constant echo of the life that once flourished here, now smothered beneath layers of dust and regret. "Marcus," he called, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and determination. He needed his son now more than ever, not just as a partner in their fight, but as the embodiment of hope. Hope that together, they could navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. Marcus appeared at the threshold, his once vibrant eyes dulled by guilt and exhaustion. The shadows of the room seemed to wrap around him, accentuating the weight of his choices. "What's the plan, Dad?" His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile veneer of resolve they had managed to piece together. Walter glanced at the document, its stark white surface a glaring contrast to the dark reality surrounding them. "We need to go to the bank. Now." His words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in urgency. "This trust fund could be our salvation. It's not just about the money. It's about reclaiming what's ours, our home, our family." Marcus nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation settling in. He seemed to wrestle with his emotions, guilt wrestling with a flicker of hope. "I never wanted it to come to this, Dad. I thought—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I thought I could fix everything." Walter felt a pang in his chest, the duality of love and disappointment battling within him. "I know, son, but fixing it starts with being honest. We can't undo the past, but we can fight for our future." The words flowed from him, a mantra he hoped would instill courage in both of them. As they stepped outside, the air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The eviction men were gathered across the street, their laughter now tinged with malice. The lead man, a burly figure with a smug smile and an air of authority, stood at the forefront, surveying the neighborhood as if it were a battlefield ready for conquest. Walter's blood boiled at the sight of him. This man had become the face of his family's ruin. "Let's go," Walter urged, determination coursing through him like a jolt of electricity. With each step, he felt the weight of the trust fund document in his pocket, a fragile promise that they could claw their way back from the brink. The bank loomed ahead, a stark gray building that felt both imposing and strangely comforting, a refuge from the chaos outside. Inside, the cool air wrapped around them like a soothing balm, yet it did little to quell the anxiety bubbling within Walter. He glanced at Marcus, who seemed to shrink beneath the weight of uncertainty. "Stay close," Walter advised, his voice firm. "We'll get through this together." They approached the teller, a woman with an efficient smile that faltered slightly as she scanned their faces. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her tone professional yet warm. Walter cleared his throat, trying to mask the quiver of his nerves. "We're here to inquire about a trust fund," he said, pulling out the document. "It's in my name, Walter Collins." The teller's smile widened as she took the document, her eyes flitting over the contents. "Let me check that for you." She turned, disappearing into a back room, leaving Walter and Marcus to simmer in their anxiety. "What if it doesn't work out?" Marcus asked, his voice a fragile whisper. "What if we can't access it?" Walter placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the tension radiate between them. "We have to believe it will. We've come this far." He tried to convey strength, though inside, doubt gnawed at him like a relentless predator. After what felt like an eternity, the teller returned, her expression unreadable. "I've confirmed the trust fund exists, Mr. Collins. However, there are stipulations regarding access." Walter's heart sank, the flicker of hope dimming. "What kind of stipulations?" She hesitated, glancing at Marcus before meeting Walter's gaze. "The fund is earmarked for specific purposes: educational expenses, healthcare, and home repairs. You would need to prove that you need the funds for these specific reasons." Walter's frustration bubbled to the surface. "But we're facing eviction. This is our home," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. "We need the money to save it." The teller's eyes softened, but she remained firm. "I understand, but the rules are clear. You'll need documentation to back your claim. Otherwise, I can't release the funds." An icy shiver ran down Walter's spine. "We don't have time for that. The eviction men." "Mr. Collins?" the teller interrupted gently. "I wish I could help you more, but my hands are tied. If you can gather the necessary documentation, I can assist you in accessing the funds." Walter felt the weight of the world crashing down upon him. The walls of the bank closed in, suffocating him. "Thank you," he replied, though the words felt hollow. As they stepped back outside, the bright sun felt like a cruel joke against the somber reality they faced. Walter's mind raced, mapping out a plan. They needed evidence, and fast. "We'll go back home. We can gather proof of the eviction notice. The repairs needed, everything." "Dad," Marcus said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if the eviction men come while we're gone?" Walter's resolve hardened. "Then we'll confront them. We can't let them take what's ours without a fight. We'll show them the trust fund document. They can't evict us if we have proof of our claim." As they hurried back to their office, Walter felt the creeping dread of time slipping away. The eviction men were a mere block away, their laughter now a haunting echo that clawed at his sanity. When they arrived, the office was as they had left it, yet the air felt thicker, charged with an impending sense of confrontation. Walter pulled out the eviction notice, the document crumpled but potent with meaning. "We need to be ready for anything," he said, his heart racing. Marcus nodded, tension radiating from him. "I'll gather the photos of the house, the repairs we need. It'll help illustrate our case." Walter watched him, pride mingling with sorrow. His son was trying to make amends, to rise from the ashes of his mistakes. "Good. We'll need every piece of evidence we can muster." As they worked side by side, the mood shifted from despair to a simmering resolve. The flicker of hope that had once been extinguished began to reignite, a small flame in the encroaching darkness. Then, from outside, they heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching, the kind of heaviness that clung to the skin, sending chills down Walter's spine. The eviction men were drawing near, their presence a palpable threat. "Here they come," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with urgency. Walter's heart thudded in his chest as he exchanged a determined glance with his son. "Remember what we're fighting for. We stand together no matter what." The door creaked open, and the lead man stepped inside, flanked by two others, their expressions smug and predatory. "Looks like you're still here, Collins," the lead man sneered, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "I'd suggest you pack your things. You don't want to make this any harder on yourself." Walter stood tall, the trust fund document clutched in his hand like a weapon. "Not so fast," he said, the words bursting forth with a newfound ferocity. "We have proof. We're not going down without a fight." The lead man's smile faltered, a flicker of surprise passing across his face. "What are you talking about?" Walter took a step forward, his heart pounding in his ears. "This trust fund is our lifeline. You can't evict us without considering our claim." The tension in the room thickened, an electric charge that crackled in the air. Walter could feel Marcus's presence beside him, a steadfast anchor as he faced the looming threat. The lead man's expression shifted, the condescension replaced by uncertainty. "Trust fund? That's a joke. It doesn't mean anything without proper documentation." Walter clenched his jaw, determination flaring within him. "We're gathering the evidence as we speak. You won't take our home without a fight." The lead man's smirk returned, but it was a mask to cover the uncertainty lurking beneath. "You're wasting your time. You think you can play this game? It's over." "No," Walter replied with conviction. "It's just beginning." As the confrontation simmered, the flicker of hope ignited into a blazing fire. They had the evidence, they had each other, and together they would reclaim their legacy no matter the cost. The rhythmic tapping of rain against the grimy window echoed in Walter Collins's small office, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing outside, both in the sky and in his life. He stood at the desk, heart racing, his eyes fixed on the trust fund document resting atop a clutter of old bills and faded family photographs. The paper felt like a lifeline, its corners frayed yet resolute, as if it held the weight of their family legacy in its delicate fibers. "Dad?" Marcus's voice broke through the murmur of the rain, pulling Walter from his thoughts. The boy's face was a mask of uncertainty, the shadows under his eyes betraying sleepless nights filled with guilt. "Are we really going through with this? I mean, what if they don't take us seriously?" Walter turned, feeling the familiar heaviness that clung to his skin like a damp blanket. He studied his son, the boy who had once looked up to him with unyielding trust. "Marcus, we have to. This is our last chance." His voice was firm but laced with an undercurrent of fear, a trembling thread woven through the fabric of his resolve. Marcus shifted his weight, his hands fidgeting at his sides. The air was thick with unspoken words, a chasm that had opened between them since the betrayal, threatening to swallow them whole. Walter felt the ache of their fractured bond, a deep-seated longing for the days when laughter echoed in their home, when love had been as abundant as the sunlight that streamed through their kitchen window. "I know I messed up," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I can't lose you too. You're all I have left." Walter's heart clenched at the raw honesty in his son's eyes. He remembered the countless times he had held Marcus, comforting him through scraped knees and broken hearts. "We'll figure this out together," he said, choosing his words carefully, as if they were fragile glass. "But we need to gather the evidence. We need to prove to them that we're worth fighting for." The urgency in Walter's voice resonated, igniting a flicker of hope in Marcus's expression. They had spent the last 2 days combing through the house, uncovering documentation, sifting through memories that had turned into ghosts. Now, standing together, they had a singular purpose: to reclaim what had been lost. As they prepared to leave the office, Walter's gaze fell on the faded family photographs hanging crookedly on the wall. Each frame held a moment frozen in time: a birthday party, a family vacation, the day Marcus graduated high school. The images felt like a bittersweet reminder of the life they had built together, now overshadowed by betrayal. "Let's go," Walter said, steeling himself against the storm outside. The rain had intensified, drumming against the pavement like a frantic heartbeat. He stepped into the darkness, his heart pounding with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Outside, the world felt different. The familiar creak of the old wood beneath his feet resonated with an unsettling echo, as if the house itself was mourning the loss of its integrity. Marcus walked beside him, their shoulders brushing, a silent testament to their newfound alliance. The drive to the courthouse was fraught with tension, the air thick with unspoken fears. Walter gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white against the worn leather, his mind racing with thoughts of the eviction men. Would they stand their ground? Would they see the desperation in his eyes, the determination etched into the lines of his face? As they approached the building, the courthouse loomed ahead like a fortress, its imposing facade a reminder of the legal battles that lay ahead. Walter felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a mixture of dread and resolve. He parked the car and turned to Marcus, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. "Are you ready?" Walter asked, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling within him. Marcus nodded, though his eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. Together, they stepped out into the downpour, the rain cascading down like a curtain of grief. The two made their way to the entrance, each step echoing the weight of their journey. Inside the courthouse, the air was cool and sterile, the scent of polished wood and old paper mingling in the atmosphere. They made their way to the records office, a small room filled with the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of papers. A weary clerk sat behind the desk, glasses perched on the edge of her nose, eyes scanning the stacks of filed documents with the precision of a hawk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice lacking the warmth that Walter desperately craved. We're looking for information about a trust fund," Walter replied, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. "I have some documents that might be related." The clerk raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest breaking through her monotone demeanor. "Let's see what you have." Walter placed the trust fund document on the desk, his hands trembling slightly as he did. The clerk adjusted her glasses, scrutinizing the paper with a blend of skepticism and curiosity. "This looks promising," she said slowly, her tone shifting, "but I'll need more than just this to proceed. You'll have to gather evidence of the eviction and any repairs that are necessary." A rush of frustration surged through Walter, a torrent of emotions threatening to spill over. "We're being evicted," he said, his voice rising slightly. "They're threatening to take our home. We need this fund to save it. Our family's legacy is at stake." The clerk's expression softened, but only slightly. "I understand, but you'll need to provide proof. The courts are strict about documentation. Do you have any eviction notices or repair estimates?" Walter felt the weight of despair settling back in his chest. We've been gathering things," he stammered, glancing at Marcus, who stood beside him, a look of determination etched on his face. "Let's go back and grab everything we have," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We can't give up now." Walter nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They had come too far to turn back now. With a quick thank you to the clerk, they left the office, the rain still pouring outside as if the universe itself was mourning their plight. Back in the car, Walter glanced at Marcus, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. "You okay?" Walter asked, his voice softer now. "Yeah," Marcus replied, though his eyes betrayed him. I wish I could take back what I did. I never meant for it to go this far." Walter felt the sting of old wounds resurfacing, but he pressed forward. "We can't dwell on the past. Right now, we need to focus on fighting for our future." As they drove back to the house, Walter's mind raced with possibilities. The trust fund had the potential to save them, but it required a leap of faith. He could feel the shackles of despair loosening, replaced with the flickering flame of hope. Arriving back home, The air felt charged with anticipation. They rushed inside, the familiar creak of the door echoing around them. Walter led Marcus to the small study where they had spent hours poring over documents, memories swirling like dust motes in the sunlit air. "The eviction notice should be here somewhere," Walter said, rummaging through the piles of papers strewn about the desk. "And I think I have an estimate for the repairs." Marcus joined him, their hands moving through the clutter in a synchronized dance of desperation. As they searched, the tension between them began to dissipate, replaced by a shared determination to reclaim their home. When they finally unearthed the eviction notice, a surge of exhilaration coursed through Walter's veins. "Here!" he exclaimed, holding it up as if it were a trophy. The words printed on the paper felt like shackles binding them to a future he refused to accept. Marcus looked up, his eyes wide with realization. "We can do this," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "We can show them that we won't back down." With the eviction notice in hand and the trust fund document tucked safely in his pocket, Walter felt the weight of the world lift ever so slightly from his shoulders. The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of their home, a flicker of hope ignited a fire that had long been extinguished. As night fell, Walter and Marcus worked side by side, their hearts beating in rhythm as they prepared for the fight ahead. The air crackled with tension, but also with the promise of redemption, a chance to rewrite their story, to reclaim their legacy, and to prove that love could rise from the ashes of betrayal. In this moment, they were not just father and son. They were warriors, united against the encroaching darkness that threatened to consume them. And together, they would stand firm, ready to face whatever storm lay ahead.